Road trip gone wrong. I was in the United States Air Force, stationed in Omaha in the late 80s. At the time, I hung with my roommate and another friend. My name is Tracy. My roommate's name was Tracy, and the girl we hung out with was named Stacy. When we were together, everyone just thought we were lying and being the teenagers we were. We always found it funny. One weekend, we decided to take a road trip to Kansas City, Missouri. We were speeding down the highway, laughing and singing at the top of our lungs. We were happy and having the time of our lives. Stacy was driving and she had a bit of a lead foot. She must have been going fast because, not before long, a state trooper pulled up behind us and turned on their lights. Stacy immediately pulled over. By the time the officer made it to her window, she already had her license and registration in hand with the window rolled down. The officer looked at her and then looked at me and Tracy. He then said, "I want you to follow me. Don't try to run off or you'll all be going to jail." He then turned, walked back to his car, and got in. Needless to say, the three of us were puzzled and talking amongst ourselves, wondering why he just didn't take Stacy's identification and just write her a ticket. The officer pulled out slowly, and we dropped in behind him and followed him down the road. He drove a few miles, then exited the highway. He drove a little ways and turned onto a dirt road that was surrounded by stalks of corn. We all stopped talking as we became more and more alarmed. However, being as young as we were scared, and since he was a police officer, we continued to follow him. The officer drove for some time down this dirt road and then pulled into an area that had a big, beat-up old barn. As he stopped, we stopped behind him, and a group of men exited the barn with shotguns in hand. It wasn't until that point that we realized we were in mortal danger and panic set in us. The officer walked back to our car and told Stacy to get out of the car and follow him to his car. As she got out, she looked at me and Tracy, and there was sheer terror on her face. She followed him to his car and he motioned her to get in on the passenger side. She complied. Tracy and I were crying, and as the armed men stood on the side of the car looking at us, we began quietly praying that we would be safe. We prayed that Stacy wasn't being hurt and somehow they would just let us leave. After a few minutes, Stacy bolted out of the officer's car and ran back to our car and jumped in the driver's seat. She was crying hysterically. So, of course, Tracy and I began crying harder. The officer got out of his car to Tracy's window as she was in the front passenger seat. He asked us, "Is it true all y'all are in the Air Force?" To which Tracy replied, "Yes, sir." The officer calmly said, "Get out of here and go back to where y'all came from. I better not see y'all again." As soon as he finished, Stacy turned on the car, whipped it around, and sped back down the dirt road. She somehow navigated back to the highway as she drove back toward the base. The silence was only broken by an occasional sob. Stacy drove for a while, and as soon as we crossed back over to Nebraska, she pulled over on the side of the highway, then began crying heavily. Tracy and I hugged her and asked if she was hurt in any way. She shook her head no. After she calmed down enough, she told us exactly what happened in that police car. After she got in the police car, she offered the officer her identification and told him that she was sorry for speeding. He took her information, then asked her, "What are you doing with those two?" Stacy was white. She explained that we were on a road trip. He then told her that if she would do certain favors for him, he might let us go without a warning. At that, Stacy had a complete meltdown. I guess while he was waiting for her to calm down, he finally looked at her identification and saw that she also had given him her military ID. He asked her if we were all in the military. She said we were. He asked her where we were stationed, and she told him which Air Force base. He then told her to go back to her car. As we sat there, after Stacy told us what occurred, I think it hit all three of us at the same time that the only thing that saved us was that we were in the military and stationed at a nearby base. We hugged each other and cried until we couldn't anymore. We didn't report what had happened. Again, we were teenagers and didn't think we would be believed over a law enforcement officer. This incident has haunted me for years, all of the what ifs, but as I have gotten older, what haunts me more is the thought that others may not have been as lucky as we were.